Because just when you think you couldn't love her anymore, she knocks it out the park again. I think I might be her #1 fan. The brilliant, the beautiful, the effervescent, the erudite, the incredibly brave Giorgia Meloni. Because the Italian Premier has decided she's had enough of Islamism in her country. She's had enough of a fifth column of Western Italian haters who want to assert their dominance on the pavements of her beloved nation. This is the woman who, when she first became Prime Minister, said, "I am a mother, I am a Christian." And she has decided that actually Italy is a Christian country and there is no place in her country for the sort of radical Islamism that seems to be blighting Great Britain. So what has she decided to do? Well, she is following the likes of France and Switzerland in banning the burqa. Good on you, I say. There's going to be a sweeping new law as well to ban other malign cultural practices, such as forced marriages and virginity testing. There will be fines of up to £2,600 or €3,000 for anyone wearing the burqa or niqab in public spaces, from schools and shops to offices and universities. But it goes further than just banning face coverings. It's going to introduce criminal penalties for cultural crimes. It raises the maximum punishment for forced marriages to 10 years in prison, with religious coercion grounds for prosecution. The spread of Islamic fundamentalism, the legislation states, undeniably constitutes the breeding ground for Islamist terrorism. Well, you'd think that Britain would understand a thing or two about terrorism. Britain, who has had the 7/7 bombings, Britain, who has seen the Southport massacre, Britain, who recently witnessed that attack on a synagogue in Manchester from an Islamist, Britain, who saw little girls targeted at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester Arena. You would think Britain would have learned its lesson by now, that in order to have a cohesive, stable, integrated society, there can be no place in Britain for Islamic fundamentalism. But no, rather than banning the burqa, when I go to various parts of London, I see more and more of the offensive costume. A costume that, to me, subjugates women, that sends a message that a woman with her hair out, with her face out, is a temptress to ill-controlled men who regard these women as chattel or shameful if they dare just exist in freedom. It is a sign of something so misogynistic, medieval and oppressive, it should have no place within our society. It is something which is a very visible and clear barrier to integration, because if you cannot make eye contact, if you cannot understand the temperament, the character, the mood of the people with whom you're trying to converse, if the message is clearly there in fabric, do not approach, do not talk to me, you are not welcome. How is that a good thing, let alone the huge questions it raises about security issues? But this is a Britain where the NHS recently turned around and said, you know what? First cousin marriage is actually a great stabilising factor within families. Not mentioning the huge toll on the NHS of the disabilities that come from a huge number of the births that happen when there is an incestuous parental relationship, the cruelty to the children upon which that is inflicted. No, we're a country that turns a blind eye when Islamists want to march on the street, call for global intifada, who shout from the river to the sea. We are a country, apparently, that cannot call a terrorist a terrorist. We are a country that, when there is a very clear Islamist extremist attack on the Jewish community, we have to turn around and pretend it's a level playing field, because this happens to Muslims too. We are a country that, instead of being able to critique the most dangerous, pernicious forms of Islamism, instead we want to silence people. We will censor them by introducing a law that makes any criticism of Islam Islamophobic, akin to a hate crime. We are a country that turned our eyes away from the grooming that was happening in towns and cities around the nation that is still taking place today. We are a country with a London mayor who will not allow any sort of investigation into the enslavement and the chronic abuse and torture of little girls in our capital city by the same grooming gangs that have blighted the likes of Rotherham. We are a country that is too afraid to call out extremism when we see it in our midst, that has yet to prescribe the dreadful terrorist Islamic Muslim Brotherhood that even Muslim nations have said are dangerous and that we should not have within this country. We are a country that, instead of tackling the root causes of division in society, instead of having the mettle to grab the nettle and say extreme Islamism is not welcome here, we will ban the burqa, we will ban FGM, and we will actually seek more than the one or two feeble prosecutions that are currently happening. We are going to ban cousin marriage. If we were to do that, that would be the greatest gift to the Muslim community. We would be taking away from people some of the most barbaric, oppressive, regressive practices that harm so many women within that community. We'll be taking away those barriers to integration. We will be beginning to erase the divisions that we so often hear blight our society only if we tackle that which does not belong here. Because peaceful, law-abiding Muslims who do integrate, who work as shopkeepers, security guards, doctors, lawyers, teachers, your neighbour, your friends, the kids who are friends of your kids at school, who are perfectly at home here, who are settled, who practice their belief system privately, who are peaceniks, who wish nobody harm. Those people are the ones worst affected when you let other people within their communities who want to tear up the rule book, who audaciously wish to conquer this country, impose their barbaric practices and their aggressive ideals upon the whole of the country, who wish harm against us as a nation, who plot against us, who meet up in mosques with extremist imams who preach vile, divisive sermons. We need to monitor what those mosques are saying. We need to arrest the imams who are the ones who are the true preachers of hate. And when we do that, and we take the bad apple out of the apple cart, then you will see how a peaceful, proper, progressive society looks. But this government, have they got the strength of Meloni? Have they got the courage to call out evil when they see it? Looking at past practice, looking at the fact they didn't want a national inquiry into the grooming gangs, looking at there's been no suggestion that we should ban the burqa. Are they ready to take the bold step to become a proper, fully integrated, peaceful nation? I wouldn't bet on it. What a tragedy it is. But there you are. Well done to Giorgia Meloni. I would go one step further, to be honest with you. I really would. I would actually say that we need to look at what is being said in mosques. I mean, Italy is going to tighten control over mosque funding and Islamic education institutions. This is where terrorist organisations, or what should be terrorist organisations, sow most of their influence. Schools, often with a charitable status. Groups that actually go as far as lobbying public institutions. We should be looking at where their money is coming from, however much they try and disguise the genesis of their funding. We should actually make sure that mosques are looked into, whether they are preaching good things or bad things. Because if it was the same in churches, if there was hellfire and brimstone and go out and murder people who do not share your faith, and it was happening in the Church of England, you can bet your bottom dollar that would be closely surveyed. We need to take a leaf out of Meloni's book. I would say we need to question whether certain faith schools are a bad idea. Because if you're separating children on the basis of religion at such a young age and saying to one subset you're going to be taught in a very different way from everybody else that doesn't share the cultural mores and progressive values of the host nation, how are you going to have a cohesive society going forward? I'm not saying we should get rid of Church of England schools or Catholic schools, because they are the schools of the state religion of this country. We remain a Christian country, however much those people who claim to be atheistic or agnostic don't like to admit it. We are culturally Christian, and that needs to be augmented. I do believe as well we should probably maintain Jewish schools, because Lord knows the fear within the hearts of those children and those families, especially given what just happened at Heaton Park. But when it comes to segregating and siloing children based upon religious attitudes, children whose parents want to isolate them from those around them and fill their heads with a completely different culture and a completely different ideology from the nation in which they're being brought up in, that cannot be a good thing. I would also go as far as to say this is a nation of animal lovers, of animal rights. In fact, we have some of the greatest animal rights in the country. We don't even allow live export of cattle. There are strict rules on how far you can take an animal before it is slaughtered. In fact, our practices are much better than even most of our European neighbours. And yet, barbaric slaughter without pre-stunning happens up and down the country in order to provide things such as halal meat. And not only that, the halal meat isn't necessarily labelled. Entire institutions are having to say, oh, we're just going to serve only halal meat in case a Muslim might want to come in here and eat. I'm sorry. We're a nation of animal lovers. I think it should be perfectly within our purview to say that we want a policy where all animals should be stunned before they're slaughtered, so as to give them the most dignified end of their life. And if you don't like that, because there are versions of halal meat that involve pre-stunning, but if you're so fundamentalist that you don't want that, then perhaps you can't integrate. Perhaps you don't understand the values of this nation. If you're the sort of man who thinks a woman shouldn't show her face in public, do you know what? Perhaps you shouldn't be in a country where someone like me, with her long blonde hair, is live on national radio, staring down the barrel of a camera, giving you this message. We don't want to become Iran. So if you want us to, well, do you know what? You should have another thing coming. And if you're unhappy with that, we don't want to persecute you. We don't want to attack you. You might want to do that to us. No, we don't wish you any harm. But what we would wish is if you don't want to be part of this brilliant nation with its fantastic tolerance and its fundamental values of peace and love and neighbourliness, if that ain't up your strasser, perhaps go and find one in a different country. I don't think that is being racist. I don't think that's being Islamophobic. I think that is just demanding the best from society, because surely that is what all of us as citizens deserve. I want your thoughts on that. What do you think we need to do as a nation to make sure that we cohere better than we do? Is it right to say things that might upset some people, like we shouldn't be having non-stunned halal slaughter? Oh, well, isn't that dreadful? That's divisive. That's intruding on someone's fundamental religious rights. Is it? Or is it actually intruding on the rights of the British public, who say we think we should be a country that has very high standards of animal welfare? When it comes to whose rights trump whose, surely the host nation has to put their ways first. And then the people who come to it can either adopt, adapt, adhere, or get lost.